Imagine driving into a town and the road starts cracking beneath your tires. Steam is rising from the ground. The trees are dead. The houses are gone. There are no people, no noise, just an eerie, suffocating silence. And smoke curling out of the earth like something underneath is alive. This isn't a movie set. This isn't a post-apocalyptic wasteland from a novel. This is Centralia, Pennsylvania, a real American town that was abandoned, demolished by its own government, and wiped off official maps. And here's the part that will genuinely disturb you. The fire that destroyed it? It started in 1962. It is still burning today, and by some estimates, it will keep burning for the next 250 years. To understand what was lost, you have to understand what Centralia once was. Founded in the 1860s, Centralia sat in the heart of the anthracite coal region in Columbia County, Pennsylvania. This was coal country, hard, working-class, proud America. Men went underground before sunrise and came back up covered in black dust, and they built a community around that labor. At its peak in the early 1900s, Centralia had over 2,700 residents. It had churches, 7 of them. It had hotels, shops, a post office, and a main street full of life. It had the kind of community where everyone knew each other's names, where families had lived for generations, where kids played in the same streets their grandparents had walked. It was unremarkable in the best possible way. It was just a normal American town, but sitting directly beneath those homes, beneath those churches, beneath those streets, were hundreds of miles of abandoned coal tunnels. That would become the town's death sentence. May 1962, Memorial Day weekend. The Centralia Borough Council decided to clean up an old strip mine pit that had been used as a landfill. The method? Simple. Burn the trash. It was common practice at the time. Not ideal, but routine. What nobody fully accounted for was that the pit had an exposed vein of coal running directly into it. The fire was lit. At first, it seemed controlled. Workers thought they had put it out. But coal doesn't die easily. Deep underground, the fire had already crept into the tunnel systems, a vast interconnected network of abandoned mine shafts stretching for miles in every direction. And down there, with no water, no access, and virtually unlimited fuel, it spread. Quietly, invisibly, unstoppably. For years, residents noticed small signs. A patch of ground that was always warm, a garden where nothing would grow, a subtle smell of sulfur in the air. But these were dismissed. Nobody wanted to believe what it might mean. Then, 1979 happened. A local gas station owner named John Coddington noticed something alarming. He inserted a measuring stick into his underground fuel storage tank to check the level, and pulled it out burning hot. The gasoline in the tank had reached 172 degrees Fahrenheit. The fire was directly beneath a gas station. The town was sitting on a time bomb. Still, the government moved slowly. Studies were commissioned. Reports were filed. The fire was real, yes, but the cost of stopping it was enormous. Early estimates to fully extinguish the fire ran into the tens of millions of dollars. For years, while politicians debated price tags, the fire kept spreading. Then, on February 14th, 1981, the situation turned terrifying. A 12-year-old boy named Todd Domboski was walking through his grandmother's backyard when the ground opened up beneath him. He fell into a sinkhole, nearly 45 feet deep, filled with carbon monoxide and hot steam from the burning mine below. He survived. His cousin grabbed him and pulled him out just in time. But that moment changed everything. The image of a child nearly swallowed alive by his own backyard was impossible to ignore. National news cameras arrived. The story exploded. And suddenly, the United States government could no longer pretend Centralia was a manageable problem. Congress responded. In 1984, they allocated $42 million to relocate Centralia's residents. Most families accepted. They took the buyout. They packed their lives into boxes, said goodbye to the only homes they'd ever known, and left. But not everyone. Here's where the story gets deeply human. A small group of residents, mostly elderly, mostly lifelong Centralians, refused to leave. To them, this wasn't just property. It wasn't just a house. It was decades of life. It was where they raised their children, where they buried their parents, where every wall had a story attached to it. One resident, a woman named Mary Lou Gaughan, said simply, "This is my home. I was born here. I'll die here." The government pushed back. In 1992, Pennsylvania Governor Robert Casey condemned all the properties in Centralia, giving the state power to claim them through eminent domain. The holdouts sued. It went to court. And in a quiet but remarkable act of compromise, the state agreed to let the remaining residents live out their lives in their homes, as long as they didn't sell. When they died, the properties would revert to the state. At its lowest point in the 2000s, Centralia had just 7 residents. As of the most recent count, fewer than 5 people remain. When they are gone, Centralia will have no residents at all. A town that once had nearly 3,000 people, erased one by a fire that nobody could stop. The physical erasure of Centralia was almost as surreal as the fire itself. Houses were demolished. Streets were torn up. The post office was closed. And in 2002, the United States Postal Service took a step that felt almost symbolic in its finality. They officially revoked Centralia's zip code, 17927. A zip code doesn't sound like much, but losing it means you don't officially exist. You can't receive mail. You're not on the map in any meaningful modern sense. Even Google Maps for years showed Centralia as a near blank space, a grid of street names leading nowhere, with no buildings, no businesses, no signs of life. What's left today is haunting. A handful of streets still remain, with fire hydrants standing on empty lots where houses once stood, cracked pavement, old staircases leading to nothing, gardens that were once tended now overgrown and wild, and always the smoke. Depending on where you walk, you'll see thin streams of it rising from the ground. In winter, the earth is warm to the touch, unnaturally warm. In some spots, the ground temperature has been measured at over 800 degrees Fahrenheit just a few feet below the surface. Centralia didn't burn down. It burned under, and it's still going. So where does that leave us today? The Centralia mine fire is still active. It has been burning continuously for over 60 years. Scientists estimate the remaining coal seam could fuel the fire for another 250 years, meaning the fire may still be burning in the year 2275. No one has stopped it. And at this point, most experts believe no one will. The cost and complexity of extinguishing a fire spread across hundreds of miles of underground tunnels. With no clear access points, unpredictable voids, and decades of accumulated heat, is considered nearly impossible at any practical scale. In a strange way, Centralia has become more famous in its absence than it ever was in its existence. Tourists come now, though they're technically trespassing on state land. They walk the broken streets, take photos of the steam rising from the ground, stand on the famous stretch of Route 61, a highway so badly cracked and buckled by the underground heat that it was permanently closed and abandoned. Some say Centralia inspired the video game and film Silent Hill, a fog-covered, abandoned town with fire burning beneath it. The creators deny a direct connection, but the parallel is impossible to miss. Centralia is a story about a lot of things. It's a story about a small mistake, a trash fire on a spring afternoon, that spiraled into something no one could control. It's a story about government bureaucracy moving too slowly while real people suffered. It's a story about the stubbornness of the human spirit, of people who looked at certain danger and said, "This is still my home." And it's a story about what happens when we build lives on top of things we don't fully understand. The fire is still there. The smoke is still rising. And somewhere beneath that empty Pennsylvania hillside, 60 years of burning coal waits patiently, with another 250 years left to go. Centralia wasn't erased by a war, or a natural disaster, or even a deliberate act. It was erased by a fire no one took seriously, until it was far too late.